Welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Tim.
Hi, everyone. I'm Keith.
Keith was with me this weekend while we were at Magic Camp, an event I have the privilege of getting to do once or twice a year where we go out to the coast for 3 to 4 days and just play Magic the whole time. This is mostly like a draft event. We do a lot of drafting, but most of it's kind of cubes. So it's a lot of kind of crazy, expressive concoctions by everybody there.
Yeah, this was my second year of Magic Camp, so very exciting getting to join you all again.
Yeah. The kind of nice thing about this is an environment that if someone's willing to put in the work to concoct something, we're going to play it. Sometimes the plight of the custom Magic designer or the cube designer is like, oh, I can make this whole cube, but I don't have 7 people to play it with. Magic Camp is that opportunity. It is that lock-in. So we'll get to it eventually, but we got to play your cube. We got to play some concoctions by some other people too. Are you mostly a draft player or?
Definitely. I'd say now all I really do is play limited. I mean, I've been playing Magic for going on 15 years now. You know, I got my start on original Innistrad, Duels of the Planeswalkers on Xbox 360, that sort of thing. But really only since moving to Portland about 2 years ago have I gotten really into Cube, and now that's kind of all I do besides the occasional pre-release or draft online. So, I'm all about limited.
Yeah, Cube is like, it's playing a really good, tabletop RPG. You need a whole group. You need someone who's creative, who's putting in the work ahead of time. It's this kind of extravagant way to play Magic, and it's very cool and very satisfying when you get to do so.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever with just, the insane release pace of new cards and varying, styles of Magic, both aesthetically and gameplay wise. It's great being able to just create a set of your own, aiming for really the kind of gameplay experience you want to have.
Yeah. Between custom, cube, and retail sets, like we have a wider and wider array of things that we're capable of doing in Magic. I sort of think of, draft around that Innistrad era, maybe Theros or Ravnica or something like that. We're talking packs that are half barely playable cards, a challenging mixture of archetypes, some of which don't even function. A definition of common that meant this card is not very good. But now with Cube, now that everyone's used to Cube, and we're even sort of past the first generation of Cube means vintage powered Cube. And now we're in a realm where Cube means any collection of a couple hundred cards that you're going to divvy up and draft has sort of allowed for this giant explosion of ideas and possibility, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I do think it was funny that we went on kind of like a power and complexity roller coaster this weekend.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you said, we went to like both ends of Magic and back, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Maybe we'll start jumping in. So right when we first got there, we had the 4 of us, so we were playing the Ninja Turtles co-op box. I know that this crew is particularly fond of weird formats, and I feel like a weird format published by the actual company, we all got to learn this, we all got to understand this, we got to do our homework. And so we played 2 rounds of that.
It was an interesting rule set they concocted. It was clearly aimed more towards newer players, but essentially you had these boss cards you flipped over, and as a team of 4, you were all kind of working together to defeat the boss. And then when you defeated one boss, kind of 2 more spawn right behind them, followed by 3, followed by 4. So as you're getting more lands into play and creatures and everything, the bosses are also growing in power, and then they play their own creatures and spells that kind of auto deploy against all of you at once. And so your goal is to kind of survive that assault and take them down at the same time.
The boss creatures all can't block, which was I think an interesting, maybe I would say one of the fundamental decisions of this format, that the boss creatures don't block. And so they are all out about attacking. The whole goal with them is just to keep them under control, either by blocking yourself or by firing off removal spells, using pump spells at the right time, things like that. But I think one of the things that developed over those 2 games, or one of my biggest takeaways playing these 2 games, was if your board doesn't get swept away, you can often eliminate a round of bosses each turn. Like, you hit turn 6, you kill one boss, its life total resets. Turn 7, you attack again, you've lost only 1 or 2 creatures. Kill another, knock out another round of bosses and so on.
I'm not sure if that was the intended pace of the game or not, but
Yeah.
obviously we're all kind of Magic sickos, and so we were
Hmm.
maybe over optimizing it a bit. And we also definitely got lucky at times, as you're flipping over these action cards. I
Yeah.
think like both games, one of the first actions that got revealed was like, sack every creature but one. And it's like, great, we have no creatures.
Yeah.
So now we're safe from that for the rest of the game. But I think where us being kind of Magic veterans also helped is we were playing really tight to not like overplay to the board. And I
Hmm.
have a feeling that's where like a newer player is probably just going to want to be like, throw out everything. And then, when it all gets wiped, it's probably much more of a closer game compared to for us where we're like, okay, well, I have a kind of full grip of cards the whole time either way.
It was kind of a walk in the park both times. We were not in danger. And we even enabled like kind of a second roll the second time where all the bosses stay in play. You just add more and more and more bosses as you go. But even that wasn't really strong enough to overcome one of the main sort of like weaknesses the boss have, which is that the bosses flip over 2 cards a turn, eventually 3 cards a turn once they recruit a specific boss. But those 2 cards a turn, maybe a little less than half of those are creatures. And there's just enough removal in these decks that we were basically killing any creature that was at all scary. Each of those creatures were modified by all the bosses. Like a boss might say, all our ninjas have death touch, all our ninjas have flying, all our ninjas have first strike. When a ninja attacks, it drains life, right? All those, a good chunk of those bosses, maybe 6 of the 10, relied on buffing the ninjas, and the ninjas were just removable.
Yeah, and it's not like the ninjas have haste or anything like that, so it's very easy to just kind of deal with them one by one. I don't think we ever took a hit.
Or if we did, it was like, we'll take a hit so that we can knock out a whole round of bosses. Like, let's not trade off. Let's not bother blocking. We're taking so little damage. We should just blow through it.
Yeah, because there's still even life gain too. I mean, they did give you a lot of different ways. Like it was cool. Each of the decks you had was like themed around a turtle. So you
Yeah.
got to like role play a little bit there, I guess. But so someone does get to have kind of like the food deck, and someone gets to
Hmm.
like go wide, and
Hmm.
getting into that aspect of it is definitely cool. And even though it was easy, I think we had a fun time just kind of trying to min max it too. I think there was one point
Yeah.
where we did like 300 damage against one
Yeah.
boss.
One of the Casey Jones cards allows you to pay a bunch of mana to double his power, and anybody can activate that. So if we all just have a bunch of mana, we could double it a bunch of times. And I think people even put a couple counters on him first so that he doubled even faster. That was a fun thing to figure out. It really did make all of us want to crack the code as to how to ramp up the difficulty further. I think the basic thing to do would be to play more cards, but that also felt a little bit off because if you're playing 50% more cards or twice as many cards, you're going to hit twice as many board wipes, which is maybe the commander problem of like, if there's a board wipe every turn cycle, then that's even less fun. It's still kind of interested. I know people have been talking about it on the Discord too, but I'm interested in ideas on like how to tweak this. I felt like it was like 80% super fun, and then just had this one weakness of, well, we just kill all the minions.
Yeah, is there a way you can play it with less than 4 players too? Right? Maybe that's
Yeah,
actually the key.
yeah. Maybe that's part of it too. Maybe the 4-player mode is sort of the like, I guess we can get this working. Like there are 4 turtles, we kind of have to do this, but maybe it's a little bit more meant for like a 2-player team up or something like that.
Yeah, and as a kind of an intro way to learn the game, I could
Yeah.
definitely see it working out well for that.
Yeah, I've played some co-op Magic with new players, and it has been really successful. You talked about Duels of the Planeswalkers earlier. That was the old Xbox game, and I remember a couple years they had Arch Enemy in there. So it'd be like me and 2 friends against a computer playing the Arch Enemy deck. The Arch Enemy has more life and flips over these bonus cards in addition to normal Magic cards. And that was like phenomenal for introducing people because they would play their turns, but if they had a question, we're not waiting on anybody. There's nobody on the other end. Hey, let me explain. Oh, you could put this first strike on this guy before combat, and then he would get through for some damage. You have time to unpack all that. The same's true for this TMNT box.
Yeah, and I think that's fun for new players that, if you're playing obviously someone who knows the game already, you don't just have them beating you right at the
Yeah,
gate. Yeah.
yeah.
Didn't Duskmorn have an archenemy type box like this? Do you know what I'm talking about? I've only ever seen like art of it floating around because it had some really cool art. But didn't they
Yeah.
have something like that with like schemes and whatnot?
Yeah, I think there was also one of the Amonkhet sets. There was like a Nicol Bolas, some archenemy cards there. Archenemy is kind of interesting because a player typically plays the archenemy. Like it doesn't autoplay for itself, which is a little bit different from what TMNT is going for, where nobody plays the bad guy. Like the rules play the bad guy. In archenemy, you have a much wider range of cards that function if a human can pilot them, if that makes sense.
I've been meaning to teach my wife how to play Magic for a while, and I could actually see something like that
Yeah.
TMT game being great for that. Probably better than something like Jumpstart, even, which is where I was thinking of, beginning. Yeah, obviously, just that co-op piece, like you said. It's nice to work together when you're first learning the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, the boss just kind of, acting on this set of rules means it's never going to do anything too crazy to you.
Yeah, that's true. This happens a lot in video games where like you might just play a video game co-op and never play the competitive multiplayer. We think of Magic as being 99+% competitive multiplayer. It doesn't have to be just that. Yeah. I think the other kind of limitation with the TMNT box, I knew I could subject you guys to this because you all love weird formats and you want to learn about the weird ins and outs of Magic, as we'll get into more. Trying to introduce someone to Magic with a TMNT theme was the thing that I had a really hard time selling other people on. I think sometimes if we hear, oh, we're going to be learning Magic, we kind of want it to be a little closer to classic Magic in a way. I don't know. Maybe that's just the people I asked.
Clearly, they're meant to bring people into Magic. So, I think some people are actually, they would love their first experience to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because that's, what piqued their interest to begin with. Yeah. But I'm definitely with you. It would be cool to have a, more Magic branded version of this for introducing new players.
Yeah. So next up, we actually had your baby. We had your cube. What kind of intro do you want to give to that before we dive into the details?
I've been working on this for the past year since the last Magic camp. And this is my first cube, but kind of in the process. There's kind of like 2 to 3 cubes that were like half made and scrapped in the process. They say you never get it right the first time. So really excited to finally get to share this with you all. But to just kind of dive right into it, it's a 720 card Eternal cube, meaning it spans across all of Magic's history with, no set or rarity restriction. And it's really just focused in on creating kind of fun, fair, synergistic type gameplay.
Yeah, we're back out of weird format mode. We're back into normal kind of cube.
Exactly.
Draft cards normally, no unusual rules. The cards are a little unusual, which we'll get to.
Aiming power-wise to be kind of just like a step below Vintage Cube, but with some rebalanced cards, a few custom cards to kind of try to allow for more overlap between archetypes and also to kind of boost certain strategies to be more competitive. Since the entire cube was proxied and I went on the insane quest to design every card myself.
Yeah, retypeset everything, yeah.
Yeah, I was able to kind of retype things as I went along. So just as a good example, like, I run a few of the Warhammer 40k Necrons, who now have just been retyped to be skeleton robots, so then that can kind of play into a little strategy there. And I have a custom Gravecrawler variant, which is the card that normally says, oh, you can cast from your graveyard if you control a zombie. This one says if you control a skeleton. So, that's just kind of an example of how now it's like, oh, you don't have to be specifically in that zombie deck to be doing that kind of recursive strategy. Yeah. It's kind of bleeding over into the artifact creature strategy with cards like that.
Yeah, you definitely seem like you're a synergy fiend in terms of your inclusions and also your changes. We were talking about the cube afterward. You were very happy with cards that had like multiple hooks for other strategies. The part of the spirit being that like if you have a card that fits into, I'm going to make these up, apologies if these aren't exactly what's in your cube, like a card that had both a +1/+1 counter payoff and also a life gain payoff. And now I can use that to like bridge my 6 life gain cards with my 7 +1/+1 counter cards. You really like the cards that overlapped a lot.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's a Johnny's Pride mate for you.
There you go.
Or like the Marvel TMNT equivalent that I'm actually running.
Hmm.
Anyhow, yeah, I think a big part of that really is the fact that because the card is 700, because the cube is 720 cards, you
Mm.
kind of require that redundancy in mechanical overlap and everything. Because I guess for people who maybe aren't as entrenched in the cube space, a 360 card cube is what you need to do a pod of 8 players. So
Hmm.
that's 15 cards per person.
All the cards will be used.
Exactly.
I mean, draft mechanics still matter, but every card will be opened. And so if you are a niche enough or cool enough or open enough archetype, you can have everything flow to you.
And it means you can put in more kind of like combo like cards, even because you're always at least going to open the other half of the combo. The great part about Cube being that, like, you never know exactly what you're going to get, what someone else is going to take first. But once you're doubling that size, obviously it's cool to have a cube that large if you're truly to do like 2 pods at once. I
Hmm.
don't think that's ever going to happen outside of maybe once a year at a SCG con, but I do like the variety that brings to the gameplay. The fact you can't count on, those other cards being the other half of your combo kind of wheeling. And it just allows you to put in a lot of cool cards you otherwise wouldn't have space for. I think in your typical 360 card or,
Mm.
540 card cube, especially if you're aiming to optimize for power, which I still am to some degree. You get a lot of slots that are just kind of like a given. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of like actual space to put in the cool new card from every set.
Hmm.
And that's kind of my intention here is I want a space where I can play cool new cards. I can fit in, rebalance cards, that maybe wouldn't normally be able to compete at that level, or maybe even some custom cards that kind of tie the room together.
Hmm. Hmm. I guess the main concern is maybe if you had an archetype that had like 20 solid cards ever printed for it, right? And you put that in a 360 cube, well, all 20 of those cards get to go to one player. But if you don't have more cards to put in and you double the cube size, now you've got a really watered down experience, which is why you're looking for more ways to punch up the archetypes that do exist and make sure that there are enough cards to go around.
Exactly. And just as another example, since I think it helps to get an idea of kind of the power level we're
Hmm.
talking about here, I love ninjas. I love ninja gameplay, but there's only so many playable
Yeah.
ninjas, kind of
Yeah.
like you said. Fortunately, there's actually been some rebalanced ninja cards already through
Mm.
the alchemy sets. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of what actually got me down this path to begin with, because I'm like,
Okay.
oh, hey, if wizards can do this, I can too. Uh, these are pretty small edits. They're things like the Dakuchi silencer is a
Mm.
ninja from Neon Dynasty Kamigawa, and it's just a 2/1 for 1 and a black with ninjutsu for the same cost. And when it deals combat damage, you get to discard a card to destroy target creature or planeswalker. That's the rebalanced version. The non rebalanced version, specifically, you have to discard a creature card. So
Mm.
obviously a much bigger
Interesting.
downside. But with just that small change, all of a sudden now it's like, well, this is a ninja card that can play with my madness spells. And
Mm.
that's so cool
Okay.
because now there's this overlap that just didn't exist there before.
I've been playing a ton of the Marvel Jumpstart, and one of the packs there is Mayhem, which is basically madness. If you discard the card, you get to cast it this turn. I would say whenever I resolve the Mayhem effect, guaranteed nice emoji from the opponent. Just lock it in. People just respect the hustle of Mayhem madness.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I kind of wish we could just decide on one or another. I'll say
Mm.
I've mixed ninjutsu
Ah.
and sneak.
Ah.
I've
Yeah.
I've tried not to really introduce much mayhem to my madness yet, but there's a little bit of mechanical complexity there, which yeah, I think we'll get into too.
Yeah. We were just talking in the Discord the other day about fading versus vanishing, which like, hey, maybe fading is the one that like expires a little slower, but and
Hmm.
maybe it was a little confusing at first, so they printed a fixed version, but printing the fixed version actually doomed both of them because now there's uncertainty as to what the rule is and no one ever remembers.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that actually comes into a game I played later this weekend in
Hmm.
the Power Cube I have in my notes. We'll get to that. But yeah, so
Yeah.
there's part of me that's just tempted to errata like every sneak
Yeah.
card to ninjutsu just to make things simpler. But it's always
Yeah.
tough in a cube like this where it's like it's not a custom cube, you know?
Mm.
I'd say it's really only like maybe 5% of cards that have been
Mm.
significantly modified in any way.
Hmm.
Is changing it more confusing than just leaving it as is? Even if it would be simpler if everything just had ninjutsu, if you're used to these new cards having sneak, is that actually more mental overhead now, seeing that as something different?
Mm.
So that's a question that I think I'll probably just get to the bottom of through a lot more play testing, but that's definitely
Yeah.
something I'm thinking about here too. It's hard when the sky's the limit. I think your audience will know, making custom sets, it
Yeah.
helps
Yeah.
in a lot of ways when you are just stuck to, oh, my cube's only going to have, cards that wizards printed themselves. And, once you open that door, it becomes a little overwhelming in a way where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you can make it everything you want it to be.
And there's another thing, kind of unpacking some stuff we said earlier, where there were for a year or two these sort of alchemy rebalances of draft formats, where they'd go in and make, when they release the alchemy extra cards on Arena, these are the most of the alchemy cards are these custom cards that basically only function digitally, but they would also go through and buff and nerf, let's call it 10 to 20 cards in the draft format, like they did this for Capenna and Kamigawa, the D&D set, and a couple other ones. That is a temptation that I've had a lot, which is to say, like, hey, let's take original Innistrad or whatever, and let's tweak 10, 15 cards such that the format is more playable, or more cards are playable, or more strategies are viable, rather than there only being 4-ish color pairs. Let's try to get that up to 7. The sky is the limit there, because then you're like, well, why don't I just include other cards that would also make this more fun? Why don't I include cards from later sets that would also make this more fun? And when to stop is probably the hardest question to answer. But do you have a sense of when you did stop? Like, do you feel
Yeah.
like you're going to go up to 10%, down to 4%? Like, where do you see yourself leaning?
I experienced a bit of this with the Marvel set already. There were like custom cards I had made that then kind of a real version of it just
Oh,
came out.
yeah.
To where it's like, I'm obviously, trying to stick within the power level wizards who print themselves. So that kind of
Yeah.
thing is like bound to happen. So, that's the kind of thing where it's like over time, yeah, I could see most of the new cards
Mm-hmm.
just kind of taking over the ones I had made myself. But I'm always going to be trying to tweak cards just to work as many places as possible, fit into different archetypes, so if there's ever a subtle change I can make, I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm always I'm obsessively test drafting this cube, looking to get it out to a lot more people. So I think I'm going to find a lot more cool little synergies I want to focus on in the future. And maybe that drives me more down the custom route. But at the end of the day, I want it to be a cube, anyone can
Yeah.
pick up and is going to recognize most of the cards, at least if they're
Mm-hmm.
playing, new magic sets.
Yeah.
I definitely include some older cards, but it definitely leans a little bit new, just
I
since
would say so.
you
Yeah.
you see a lot more of those kind of cards that do a lot of things nowadays than you
Yeah.
did, kind of in the pre-Fire Age of Magic. But one limit I did want to call out
Hmm.
is because you kind of touched on it earlier. I did decide I wasn't going to run any rebalances that nerfed the cards. Uh,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
and there were a few that really tempted me.
Yeah.
Like I love Corey Steelcutter as a card, but it's just completely and utterly broken.
Mm.
I don't think we have to get into exactly what it does,
Yeah.
but there's an official alchemy rebalance for that, and
Mm.
I'd kind of come up with my own take on it too. But at the end of the day, I just kind of decided like, is that fun? I think it's cool seeing cards that like maybe you played with in draft that never really performed at this level before. Now
Mm-hmm.
here's some tweak that lets you use them in this cool new context. But I don't know how satisfying it is to get a card that you're like, oh, this is still good, but it's not as
Yeah.
good as I remember. Maybe I shouldn't have actually picked this. So I decided not to include any of those.
Yeah. Having them all be pleasant surprises, I think, is crucial to maintaining the vibe. I would say,
Exactly.
like, if something's being changed, it's being changed, and to make it more fun to play, more likely to interact with things.
Yeah.
The edits on creature types are good examples.
Exactly. And I think that helps too. It's almost like a little way of signposting to my drafters, here's some types and some archetypes that matter. When you see that
Yeah.
little underline under the creature type,
Hmm.
or I should mention too, anything that's
Yeah.
been rebalanced, I've gone and I've put like a big scale in the corner where you would
Hmm.
normally have like the transform icon. And so
Hmm.
it's just really obvious, oh, something's different about this card. It might be a
Hmm.
tiny little thing, but again, that can kind of cue off, give signals. Maybe this is an
Yeah.
archetype worth looking into. That I then
Hmm.
don't have to kind of spend gold slots really kind of hammering them over the head with. Oh, look, here's the card that cares about vampires, because, that's just kind of seeded more naturally throughout the draft.
Yeah, and it might give you a little bit of confidence that, like, if a creature type is added to a card and underlined, then at least you believe the archetype is real. Like, eh, who knows if it plays out to be strong enough or satisfying enough or open enough in a given draft, but at least Keith has given the stamp of approval that, like, look for skeleton robots.
Exactly. And I try to keep all the creature types within what you would realistically think they can be just by looking at the card. Because I
Yeah.
think Wizards is a little all over the place too, in terms of what is the difference in between a shaman and a wizard and a
Yeah.
warlock and a
Hmm.
sorcerer is
Yeah.
just kind of arbitrary at this point.
Yeah, and that was a good feeling, I think. Like just seeing, hey, we consolidate them down into wizards, we consolidate down to into warriors. Yeah, I think that was effective as well. I think the other thing that was kind of novel about it is the way that you sort of package the cards. So I think that just to kind of overview, there were kind of two things that you did that I don't see very often. One of which you for flip cards, you also basically provide, I don't know what to call it, a token or an additional copy of it to actually play with. So that you draft the, Miles Morales, and then you also get the copy that is the clear sleeve version that has both sides.
Yeah, that's something that's always irked me,
Mm.
in certain drafts where it's like,
Yeah.
I would love to know what the backside of this card does,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm like nervous to flip it over in the middle of a draft, or you just
Yeah.
watch everyone at the table go around and do that, So I think it's
Mhm.
nice being able to just give that up front, quickly see front, back, here's what the card does.
Yeah.
I think it allows me to run more double-sided cards than you'd probably normally want to, because at least here it's a little bit easier to parse, but obviously that's another perk of just being able to proxy them. Normally you
Yeah.
wouldn't want to buy two Sephiroths just to do
Okay.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here fortunately that wasn't a problem.
I mean, during the draft, it's sort of my own responsibility. Am I willing to pull this card out to look at the other side? Do I not know the other side? Maybe I'll do that, maybe I won't. But during gameplay, if I flop down Miles Morales, the person I'm playing against often does not know the exact text of the back of Miles Morales. You know what I mean? And so to be able to just say, hey, here's what the other side will look like, and they can just look at that as long as I want without interfering with me tapping or putting counters on my card or enchanting my card. Like they have their own copy almost that they can look at until we're ready to flip. I found that to be an asset. I it kind of made me want to hand out reader versions of other complicated cards like, oh, here's my weird saga. Also, here's your copy so you know what's coming up on step 3.
Oh yeah, that's not a bad idea.
The other piece that you had was like an extra card in there to thicken up the sleeve, and then maybe you said, hey, well, I'm making the sleeve thick. Why don't I throw the token in there too? Hey, this makes a goblin token. Let's put it in the sleeve.
Yeah, and I think that played out really well in games. It's nice. I mean, so many cards, especially the ones that just make like a clue or a food or a treasure or something
Mhm.
like that, you never really need more than one of anyway.
Yeah.
So it's nice not to have to either go digging through a token box or trying to represent that with a random card that you then
Yeah.
forget what that was supposed to represent a turn or two later.
Mhm.
You just pull it at the back and, slap it on the playfield.
It's kind of interesting because I think you've approached a problem that a lot of cube designers run into, or two problems, one of which is DFCs, what to do with DFCs, and then what to do with tokens. And in some cases, like the instinct is to just say, cut them all. The kind of stereotypical bar cube, the bar cube doesn't require any tokens or dice, and maybe not even any sleeves. So we're going to play with all kind of cards that operate without any assistance. And you're saying, oh no, I want those. I'm going to do everything I can to accommodate those so I can make sure that those can be present without them being quite as annoying to play.
Yeah, and I would say one other thing I did to try and smooth out the draft, and I was able to make cards have reminder text that never had them to begin with.
Mm.
So that was one other thing where, for instance, I ran Duelist of the Mind. It was actually a great
Oh,
card
yeah.
in the deck I drafted that day. But normally there's no printing of that card that tells you what it means to commit a crime.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not something I would just expect everyone to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think there's an interesting question to be had there of on cards like that, I've obviously done my best to trying to like even wordsmith the reminders to be like as small as possible to keep
Yeah.
everything within like a reasonable text size still. But I do think there's something still to where it's like, I almost wonder like the pros and cons of including reminder text sometimes, or maybe it makes a card look more intimidating than it actually is, but
Mm.
that's just because I'm actually explaining what it
Yeah.
does, and you're not used
Yeah.
to seeing that.
The ability to catch someone up on all the relevant mechanics has gone down and down and down over time with Magic. Like, there are more sets. I would say they use somewhat fewer new keywords than they used to, but it's still, I would say, at least 1%. And so now that we have like 100 plus sets, 100 plus keywords, and sometimes we double or triple, or in like a guild pack kind of, or a Guilds of Ravnica kind of thing, we might add 5 new keywords. One or two of those cards break containment and get played in cubes, but only the real nerds actually know what all those mechanics do.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that like playing your cube did give me the impulse to go like not that 5%, but into like the 30% range in terms of custom stuff, and just say like, you know what, we're gonna have 11 high power commit a crime cards, whether we have to do that through errata or custom cards or whatever else. We're just going to make this happen. That felt like further than you were interested in going, but it was definitely an inspiration on my end.
Talking with you, I mean, maybe that's where this ends up over time. Again, I would love not to explain what sneak does and how
Yeah.
that differs from ninjutsu. If we could just have them all be ninjutsu, obviously that would be a lot easier.
Yeah, I had sort of the vision almost of like, okay, I'm making a 360 half custom cube that is basically like 5 guilds, but the guilds are like mechanics from 5 completely different unguild related sets where, we're getting commit a crime in there, and we're getting, we talk about ninjutsu a lot. We're getting ninjutsu in there. We're bulking up each of those so that all of those are like playable mechanics that have identities, that have decks around them. Like it gave me that kind of inspiration, which is what I want out of playing a cube.
Mm-hmm. You did bring up something interesting there, just in the mention of guilds, which just
Mm.
reminded me of one other thing I
Mhm.
probably should have mentioned more up front. But just, in making this cube, I had mentioned I'd kind of like, there's been like kind of like the soul of another cube or two to get to the
Mm.
point where this one was
Mhm.
finished. I had built a cube that was just like this, kind of equally synergy focused, but all built around 2 color pairs. And maybe
Mhm.
it was just my obsessive test drafting, but that started to feel really on rails for me after a while, in the sense
Mm.
that it was just like, oh, the Boros deck's always looking to do equipment.
Mm.
And, Selesnya is really trying to do enchantments. And, part of, I think, kind of cracking the vision of what I wanted this cube to be was actually thinking more in terms of like 3 color archetypes across the board, you know?
Mhm.
So it's less Golgari cares about the graveyard, and it's more like Sultai cares about the graveyard.
Mm.
And, maybe Sultai's more, or sorry, maybe Simic's more about cards leaving the graveyard while
Mm.
Golgari's about putting them in there, but there's kind of like a broader synergy across the 3 color pairs. But I found when I started thinking about the cube in that way that it just allowed for so much more play between the lanes
Mm.
than when you're building kind of your typical, like how Wizards would do it, 10 color pairs for a set.
Mhm. This is also to me a difference that I've become more aware of over time between like a retail set's design and a cube's design. I think I've become more and more comfortable with like, sometimes these are called like clown shoes kind of cubes, like ones with really strong bizarre themes or intense themes, or cubes that are like more linear than you'd see a normal draft set. I personally love drafting linear decks. I know it's often not challenging to do so, but like I am comfortable if I'm playing a cube, I'm going to play this cube once or twice in my life. Give me something entertaining to draft, and like I got to figure out exactly which lane I'm in, and maybe there's some crossover. But like if red white is always robots, Give me some robots. I'm never going to play this cube again. Give me something super linear. I think that is something that I thought about a lot this weekend, was like the draft phases were quite long. Like we were easily 30 minutes on most of these draft phases, and one of them, which we'll get to, was way over 30 minutes.
Yeah.
This is like an okay thing. Hey, we're all buds. We're all just trying to have a good time. We're all trying to read all these cards. It's fun to read Magic cards. It's fun to just look through cards, right? But you like absorb a ton of information and then you never use it again. Maybe we could make it a little bit easier to get through this draft phase, with our spirits intact, by making it a little more linear, a little simpler, anything in that area, I guess.
Oh, definitely. I do think, though, that's something to just keep in mind when you're building a cube or a custom set for that matter, is how many times do you think you'll play this draft,
Yeah.
Because at least in my case, like my plan is like, this cube is my baby, and anywhere I'm going, if I ever get the chance to bring a cube, I'm bringing this one. So, the hope is over time, at least, some of the mechanical complexity gets learned. But I know there's other people who would much rather bring something different every single week, or they have multiple custom sets. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. But I think, sort of to your point, that's something to keep in mind as you're defining the complexity of your set. If it is something you plan on being more kind of one and done, maybe you don't have a regular group you can play with. Yeah, maybe it is really worth kind of toning down the complexity a little bit, because people aren't going to get around to learning what most of the cards do. They're going to have one experience with it. And to your point, just try and make it a fun one.
Or we had Mono Whiteboarder on a couple weeks ago to talk about his set that he made with Red Bay. And it was like the third set they had made together, the third custom set. And I think that part of their mentality going in was like, we're going to do some test drafts of this custom set and we might play some games. But mostly the idea here is to have a bunch of fun designing the set. And if it's not like perfectly coherent or perfectly locked down, F it. We're making something that's kind of ephemeral, and be comfortable with that. Like they're not making a commitment to, this is the third set. They're not going to like try to draft this whenever they can. They're going to make a splash with it, learn a bunch of stuff, try a bunch of stuff, and then just, it is what it is. And that was not a mentality I had going in when I made my first set a million years ago. And like, I'm trying to embrace that more. If I'm going to make a cube these days, I really shouldn't aim for this is my baby, because I got too much going on. You know what I mean? Maybe from your point of view, you're like, no, this is the thing that I want to dedicate to. I want to learn everything about cube through this one work that I really hone. And I respect that as well. But I'm a little more in the goofball zone of like, let me put together something weird.
Yeah, and I totally respect that. And yeah, we definitely played plenty of weird cubes this weekend too.
Yeah. So I guess the refrain coming out of the Keith cube was like, we got DFC madness. We got every card works in two different strategies. We got like the absolute master plan, super villain sort of structure of a cube that like every card interfaces with every other card. The next thing we played was Kamigawa block cube. So cards from 20 years ago, half of them are bad. That's what we're drafting. What was your impression going into this?
It felt like this cube had a lot of custom cards too. I mean, what the hell is a Zubera?
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah. When you were drafting it, like what were the things you were seeing? What themes did you see, or what did you end up in, or maybe some of that stuff?
Yeah, I found myself landing into kind of a Demir Demon's Lane, where I had 2 to 3 copies of that card, Raving Oni Slave, which, it's a 3/3 for 1 and a black. Crazy value. Way more power than you'd get at that level normally. But you take 3 damage when he comes in if you don't have a demon, and then when he dies, you take another 3 damage if you don't have a demon in play. So I should say it felt like Kamigawa. I'm not totally familiar with the set, but the theme here was really, it was ogres and demons, and so you need to have both. But sometimes, just a 3/3 guy for 2 was enough to get it done.
I that's one of my favorite cards for that archetype, for all those black creatures, is like this mixture of this almost like flavor mixture of, I've got little guys that are ogres that are, minions almost, but they're giant minions. They're typically like 3/3, like you said. And then you've got a couple demons that most of the demons are legendary, if I have that demon in play, maybe it cares about me having an ogre, and then the ogre cares about me having a demon, and then like I'm putting together some cards that there's no other format on Earth where I'd ever cast that card.
Yeah, and all the demons seem to have downsides too. So I had one that was like it was a 4-mana 5/5, but his thing was when he dies, you got to sack all your non-ogre creatures.
Yeah,
you got to be careful.
Yeah, and hey, if you are disciplined about it, who cares? Like I'm already set up, or all the other creatures I had stunk anyhow. So
Oh, exactly.
yeah, the Kamigawa cube. So this was something that I put together years ago. This is probably 7, 8 years ago now. And this is sort of like Kamigawa block. So there's 3 sets there: champions, betrayers, and saviors. I cut the card pool down by about half, and then it's the rarity is also collated. So there's 3 of each common, 2 of each uncommon, 1 of each rare, and then there's 2 rares per pack. This provides like the best of Kamigawa block while still having enough fun things to shoot for. In the process of researching this, I had the opportunity on Magic Online to draft actual Kamigawa block. I don't know, maybe like 5 times on Magic Online. And it is not an experience that I think a lot of people will find that satisfying.
Were they doing it the same way as your cube?
They were doing it like 1 pack of champions, 1 pack of betrayers, 1 pack of saviors.
Okay, but I know you included extra rares in yours, right?
Yeah, I do double rares. So the stuff on Magic Online was like fully retail packs. It was not customized in any way.
Okay. Yeah, I think the extra rares definitely helped, though. You got a couple of good cards at least, too. Outweigh all the stinkers.
Yeah, part of the thing is that, like, back in the day, they didn't care if rares were strong. And a very large number of rares were not strong cards. They were just weird cards. Like, is this card complex? Make it a rare. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And it was almost seen as, like, when you open a booster, maybe the rare that you got was just a weirdo. One with Nothing is the famous one, which was from this block of just like pay in black mana, discard your hand. There were many rares, some of which are quests you shouldn't actually chase because they're not going to reward you. And I kind of like some of that, but in a cube, this is your one chance to ever draft this. Maybe you'll draft it again 3 years from now or whatever. I don't want you to have quite that level of harshness. So I aim for kind of a mixture of like 50% like strong rares and 50% like goofball quests, basically. And I think that actually puts people on the right track, because sometimes you're just in the mood to go on a weird quest that might not work, and sometimes you just want to draft a deck that's good, or it's like pack 3 and you still need some good cards. Maybe you'll float a rare too that'll salvage your draft.
Mm-hmm. I would say it definitely felt like the decks built around just like commons and uncommons were performing the best anyway, as long as you kind of stuck to a theme. If you were the spirit deck or the samurai deck, that seemed to do better than just rare drafting, which honestly I found to be kind of a relief. And I think that's a really cool part of lower powered cubes like this, or set cubes even, is just the fact that some of the best cards in your deck, it's not the mocks you were drawing your first turn. It was like that spirit that you drew in the last minute when like all you needed to draw was a spirit. You have another guy in play who will drain your opponent for 1, when you play a spirit. And, that's all it takes. And, you get these really cool, close games out of, playing lower powered cards like this.
Yeah, yeah. The kind of main thing that flows throughout the sets are the spirits that care about when spirit and arcane spells are cast. Is a thing that like is on a lot of cards, is on a lot of spirits. And so like having enough cards to trigger those like really starts to matter. You've got these kind of the original flip cards that kind of flip upside down. Like these really want you to be casting spirit and arcane. So now you're trying to balance that out with like, well, how many of those cards did I get? Were they good enough for me to like start making, power level cuts in order to get synergy? Or even an ogre thing, like those are still important enough that you're changing the composition of your deck to fit the synergy that you're after, which I also appreciate. I don't know.
Yeah, I do gotta say though, I think Samurai might be a little broken.
Yeah, Shobi was one of the people we were playing with was concerned that their deck was like too weak, but then ended up smacking people around.
Konda's Hatamoto I tell my wife's
Oh, yeah.
cringing in the other room. She speaks Japanese, and
Oh,
I'm sure I
okay.
just butchered that.
You
It's
did
a
well. You did all right.
it's a 1/2 with Bushido 1, and if you control a legendary samurai, he gets +1, +2, and vigilance.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy is just like a wall. Because for those who don't know, Bushido 1 just means when it is blocked, it gets +1, +1.
Yeah.
Once you get a legendary samurai online,
Mm-hmm.
that means it's essentially blocking with 5 toughness. And because he has vigilance, he's always there. He's always in the
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to be really clever, being like, oh, I'm not going to take this guy out. I'm going to take out the legendary samurai, in the middle of combat, in order to bring his
Mm-hmm.
power down. But there was just always another. All these guys, they're commons and uncommons.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he just had a whole deck of them.
Yeah. Yeah. The samurai are kind of funny because the samurai synergy does not kick in at all at common. All the rare creatures in the block are all legends. So legendary samurai is a somewhat easier thing to hit because most of the legendary creatures in those colors in red and white are samurai. And, once you have one legendary samurai, yeah, that Hatamoto gets quite good quite fast. And, a 2/4 is maybe that turns into a 3/5 is maybe not that impressive if you're playing like a modern limited set, but is quite a bit bigger than everybody else, besides maybe the green cards. Yeah, the samurai was pretty fun to play against. I tried to just play the Zubera, which you mentioned before. These are creatures that care about other Zubera dying. I found kind of a nice niche for that, which is to like pair Zubera with equipment so that I didn't mind if they died. But I mostly drafted that deck just to have fun with my own cube and be a weirdo.
I think it went pretty well though. I was impressed with the Zubera, and
Yeah.
I hope they bring them back when we go to Kamigawa for Titanfall. Maybe Zubera, gonna make a big comeback.
There you go. The Zoobs. ZoobTube. The actual good card in my deck is like you were saying, the commons are sometimes the good cards, and mine was Glacial Ray, which is a card that is insanely good in the set. It is 2 mana for a shock, but it has Splice on Arcane, which means that you can basically add a shock onto another arcane spell for 2 more mana. This 2 damage here buys you a little bit more murder than a 2 damage does in 2026. Every arcane spell is like a bonus, like decent removal spell. And if I could just stock enough arcane spells, which, there's like an arcane spell that just draws a card. So I can draw a card and then basically turn it into Electrolyze without even giving up that extra card. No one actually attempted the Doom
The
quest
mill?
of the Dampen Thought,
Yeah.
the mill card, which is 2 mana to mill 4, and then Splice on Arcane for 2 more mana. I have done that and failed to do it several times in previous attempts. Slightly doomed, but if you're going for the mill plan, you're slightly doomed.
It definitely sounds like fun though. So
Yeah.
do you think Splice on Arcane, do you think that's the true Kamigawa mechanic they're gonna bring back? Probably not Zubera.
I don't know how freaky they want to get with it. We got hints that we got 2 arcane spells in Marvel. And that also made people think like, oh, maybe we'll get Midnight Suns. Maybe we'll get magical, whatever, Stephen Strange, Doctor Strange stuff. Maybe we'll get Arcane again. Will it be Splice on Arcane? It's definitely more possible now than it was 10 years ago to do Splice on Arcane. I'm confident you could do the arena interface for Splice on Arcane. Whether they want to subject new players to Splice on Arcane, I'm a little less confident.
Maybe we'll just do something else with Arcane. That wouldn't surprise me. Or I think they did a bit of that with like Lessons when we all thought like we were getting Learn back, and then it turned out like Lessons were extremely powerful. They just had nothing to do with Learn.
Yeah, they're just tagged with Lesson. I mean, some of the stuff we talked about earlier, like Madness into Mayhem, Ninjutsu into Sneak. Maybe we'll get that for Splice.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Alrighty. So after Kamigawa Cube, the next thing that we did was No Limit Cube, but this was even further past No Limit, just to kind of frame what No Limit typically means in cubes, because this is like an emerging thing, I would say, in the last couple of years. No Limit is typically a power level beyond Vintage Cube. It typically includes cards that are not traditional Magic cards, but are canon cards. So Some of those include conspiracies. So if you draft a conspiracy and start with the conspiracy in 1-on-1, that is basically like a free 8th card that you cast for free. There's Vanguard cards, which are sort of like in conspiracy, but they not only have a power, they also modify your own starting hand size and life. And then there are a bunch of other stuff that are like sometimes kind of comedy cards or other cards that are a little awkward for normal play, but exist as physical cards, so people play them. Brandon had a twist for us for this one, though. What was that?
Yeah. Naturally, this is a power cube, but the twist this time around was it was just power for everyone. So you got to start with a playset of Mox, so each of the 5 colors, and a Black Lotus. And then you could trade in any of those cards to act kind of like a cogwork librarian, which for those not familiar with that just means you could basically take one of your Mox out of your pool, get rid of that forever, but then take an extra card out of any pack. And I think that just goes to show you kind of the power level of some of these cards that, no, I think all of us are willing to, once or twice, give up a Mox just to get another card from the pack.
Yeah. It was quite a fun choice to make. And I think most players did it at least once, I want to say.
Yeah, I think some people went up to doing it like 3 times at least, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that was kind of the name of the game. I mean, you definitely had to commit to a win con. This is so beyond normal Magic, that you kind of need a way to win like turn 1 or 2, ideally, to where it's like, you had to assemble those combos. And so sometimes when you saw both the pieces you needed in one pack, it made sense to just take them both at once.
Yeah. I guess sometimes it's maybe kind of not that fun when the 2 combo pieces are in the same pack and you're like, this is the whole thing that I needed. I wish I would pay any price to get these 2 cards right now. And that's, you turn in your Mox and you've paid that price.
Yeah. And I do think, honestly, it was neat that generally, in powered cube drafts, you see a Mox, you kind of take the Mox. Because even if it's not in your colors, it's generally just a Mox is so powerful. It's kind of, you should take it above everything else. So I do think it actually gave a little bit more room to the draft, that there wasn't that feeling of just like, oh, well, I opened the Mox, so even though these other cards look really cool and I can build around them, I'm just going to take the Mox anyway, So I think it was a neat twist to just start with them this time instead, and then, focus on your strategy.
Yeah, I think it's like just an absolute backup plan for that frustration, for draft frustration, where you have the option. Maybe it's not even the right option. You just feel like doing it. I just want both of these cards. I embarked on drafting Brain Freeze, but only to find out at the end of the draft that my friend Christopher, friend of the pod, had drafted Brain Freeze like 2nd pick or something, and I had no chance of ever seeing it. I think the other kind of fun thing about everyone having a bunch of Moxes is that it lights up a whole bunch of strategies that are already solid, but go way over the top, like anything artifacty. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Forensic Gadgeteer, which I think is mostly a famous card because it combos with another card, Basalt Monolith, to produce infinite colorless mana. That's like what it's normally for. But it also has the text, whenever you cast an artifact spell, investigate. If I had a Mox, I could cast the Mox, get a clue. That clue costs only 1 mana to crack. I could use my Mox to crack that clue and look at yet another card. So it created like a fun ability to tunnel through my deck and, I don't know, do things that I don't normally get to do. Like just to... my deck was a flop. Like I was able to win a game or 2, but it was just because I was drawing a million cards and could find every card in my deck. What did you do in that one? Do you remember?
None of my games went that long, really, for better or for worse. I warped my deck around the sneak attack plan. Because that was my pack 1, pick 1, which basically just says, it's an enchantment for 4 mana, 3 in a red, and you pay 1 red to sneak a creature into play, and you sacrifice it at the end of turn. So obviously a bit of a gimmicky strategy, but I think what really pushes it over the edge is, remember, this is no limit. The cards we're sneaking in are just totally busted. So one of my sneak attack targets was the BFM, Big Furry Monster, from one of the unsets. He's a 99 power, 99 toughness creature who can only be blocked by 3 or more creatures. And normally in the unsets, this is actually like 2 split cards, and here in No Limit, it's just 1 card. So basically, as soon as you got that card in, if your opponent didn't have an answer, you win. And I had an Emperor of Bones to kind of back up that strategy
Oh,
too. It's
okay.
like a way to get him out of my graveyard
Yeah.
and tapped and attacking as well. And then I had some of the other cards that kind of fit into that same strategy. But funnily enough, never drew my sneak attack.
Oh, really?
Not one game. So, but sometimes just one off of, the other sort of busted cards in my deck. I kind of warped it all around. I realized that interaction is king. And so I was playing Jeskai Black, and Black really more just for that Emperor of Bones and a Duress, which I realized was the strongest card in my deck. Because a lot of these decks, you're trying to cheat these cards into play that you might only have like one way to play them naturally. Because these are cards with, like, using the BFM as an example, is like 12 black mana or something like that, or there's a number of cards included here that just have no mana cost at all. So you have to find a way to get them in. And there's a few of those sprinkled throughout the draft, so you can tinker them. You can get an Aether Vial or things like that. But it was often if you countered that spell or you could duress it out of their hand, well, then it was just kind of game over. So
it's going to be another 8 turns before they draw enough stuff to combo again. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So one game was just kind of one off of a 2/2 rogue off of a currency converter after I got rid of their only win con. And then other games were just lost on turn 2 to a Thassa's demonic consult. And there was nothing I could do about that.
I was going to shout that out. My wife, Gabby, I was just crying a proud nerd tear when she turn 3 Thoracled me, which is the card where you have to basically empty your library. And if your library is empty, you win the game. You combine that with Demonic Consultation, where you name a card and sort of tunnel through your deck until you find that card. You just name a card that you don't have in your deck. And now you empty out your deck. You play Thassa's Oracle. You just slam win the game on the spot. She had no other way to win. It was all in on this. Tutors, digging, anything else she needed, removal to stay alive. Yeah, so that was very fun to see. Alrighty. Maybe the highlight of the weekend, or at least easily the most memorable part of the weekend, was playing Hell's Cube. Had you heard of Hell's Cube before?
I had actually, but I had never undertaken actually playing it.
Yeah, I'd scouted out a little bit, maybe for some content in the future, but got to talk about it here. So Hell's Cube is a kind of online project, very memey, very edgelordy sort of magic cards that are designed and often are very far off of a printable magic card. Some of these cards look like Pokemon cards. They look like cards that are torn, that are missing half their text, that have all kinds of different problems with them. One of the cards I played looked like a Wingspan card from that card game. These Hell's Cube cards are typically also jokey. Like I had a card that was Clippy, the old Microsoft Office assistant. I had Smallpox, but you got the vaccine was the name of the card. We're talking with like cards that almost all of them are going to have something goofy about them.
But yeah, I don't think you want to underestimate them either. Power level wise, this was a step above No Limit even. This had been extra no limits. So they might look like joke cards, but they sure pack a punch.
Yeah, that made for one of the most unusual draft phases, maybe the number one in my life. This was a literal 2-hour draft phase because it just took that long to read and grok all these cards. Because some of these cards are poop. They're just bad. And some of them are absolutely giga-busted. And it's up to you to figure it out. And you're all quiet during the draft phase. So if you want to know if it's busted or not, you got to crack the code on your own.
Yeah, and a lot of cards just not working the way you'd expect them to.
Yeah.
I remember one still I probably stared at for about 5 minutes. It was just called Embrace Self. And it has 2 creatures bestow each other. And that's all it says. And I'm just thinking, like, what the hell does that mean? But it was definitely a lot of fun, and I enjoyed all the plays on words. It's definitely something for Magic Boomers to I'd say, just in the sense there's a lot of like callbacks to old cards. Sometimes you kind of had to, understand those two to kind of know what the card actually does. I think like one you mentioned, it just says, oh, target creature with summoning sickness does the smallpox thing. And
Yeah.
you have to know what the smallpox thing is.
Yeah. And sometimes it would be like a tiny version of the card pasted onto the frame. Like how much help you would get is variable. I think as part of the joke is that sometimes it's really clear and sometimes it's absolutely not clear what the correct reading of the card is. There is apparently like a gigantic like FAQ for all the cards, like a kind of like Oracle for all the cards if you really want to look it up. But we don't want to look it up, like that's pretty intense.
Yeah, no, it was way more fun just going through all of them, though. I will say, I think we started this draft way too late.
We had a morale issue break out in the middle of this draft, or by the end of the draft, where like people were grumpy, people didn't want to play, and we left the decks together. We played the next morning. People were a little happier because some of the cards are beyond power cube level. If you're already grumpy and then someone deploys one of those on you, like you're even further into the salt mines, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of free spells. A lot of ways to take extra turns. Ways to end people's turns at instant speed, which is basically just taking another turn, And then obviously there's that barrier of just understanding, what the hell the card does. Which there were a lot of cases, and I'd say half the time at least it was a lot of fun realizing, oh, here was a card you had passed around, you thought this was just a joke, and then they play against you and you're like, oh no, this is crazy.
No,
this doesn't do at all what I thought it did. Like, this is insane.
It's one of the 10 strongest Magic cards I've ever seen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, to your point, sometimes that was frustrating. Sometimes that was really cool, though.
Maybe kind of like we were talking earlier, it made me feel more confident and just like throw out a bunch of designs. Maybe don't apply the like really precise like power level filter that we are, as Magic players are really comfortable applying. Maybe just kind of let something be too busted or not too busted. It's going to get cast 10 times ever. So the amount of sin that you can create designing a card that's too strong is actually a little lower than you might think with custom cards.
That's definitely true. I do think there were kind of two takeaways I had, at least, kind of seeing how Hell's Cube played out in person, kind of applying back to your own custom Magic sets and such. One was, I don't know if you had noticed this, but there was just so much shuffling involved. I think it was a strategy of the cube, actually. Yeah. Like, I had one card, for instance, it was a land that let me put a Pot of Greed from Yu-Gi-Oh! Onto the bottom of my library. So that's just 0 mana, draw 2 cards. But then you obviously need a way of getting that back on top. So there's all these weird cards that just have you, like, shuffle your deck and fail to find every turn and things like that. So you could definitely tell this was a set designed for digital play.
Yeah.
Where you could just press a button and hit shuffle. That then doesn't translate as well to play in person. I also kind of got the feeling, and I got a little bit of this with No Limit 2, if I'm being honest. There's certain decks here, we were kind of talking earlier, really fun, really crazy in power level. But they're the kind of decks, maybe if you're playing against a complete stranger, is cool to just kind of stomp them and move on, but a little harder when, you've all been drafting together for like 2 hours, and you're excited to do anything, and then you're just shut down on the spot. So definitely something to think about when you're designing here at the Peaks of Power.
Yeah. The amount of time it took to draft then made people extra impatient about playing some Magic, and then maybe some of those games are non-games. Sometimes it is more fun to really absolutely destroy someone versus like run over a 12-year-old kid at the game store at a pre-release, but it also makes you even more empathetic with when your friend's clearly not having a good time, and then you just deploy something extra annoying against them. And they just had no chance the whole game of coming back.
Yeah, especially something they've never seen before.
Yeah. And maybe they're feeling bad that they didn't draft perfectly, because who can in this format,
Yeah, I did like Gabby's strategy of, I think at the end, she just threw all of her cards into one pile and put
Yeah.
in like 5 of each land and rolled with it. And honestly, I think we might have had more fun doing it like that.
Yeah.
That's a thought in the future, like sealed deck Hell's Cube.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually feel like that has a lot of potential. Like you get your 60 random cards or however many 90 random cards, build a deck with these. It's still going to take you an hour to build that deck because you still got to read all those cards, but that's still significantly less than the 2+ hours it took to draft it. So maybe sealed is the route for this kind of insane format. I was surprised at not only the high comedy level of the cards, but also the intentionality behind like making sure that there were things to draft around. I don't know. That was really impressive.
I was potentially trying a little too hard, but I saw through the weave and actually drafted like a coherent deck. It was all based around like artifacts and enchantments,
Beautiful.
So, props to the designers of Hell's Cube for,
absolutely crazy.
making something that works, and that's their theme. After all, it says on a lot of cards, like it just works, which means it shouldn't work, but trust us, it does.
Yeah.
But it was cool, even here at like some of the highest power you could imagine, seeing actual strategies and synergies and things emerge. It was just hard to find them sometimes.
There you go. Yeah. I'd been interested in Hell's Cube because it goes by on Reddit for me, and just like the hit rate is like weirdly crazy high. Like there's so many entertaining cards, and to actually play with it was very fun.
Yeah, though I'm not super familiar with Hell's Cube, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Brandon mentioned this was Hell's Cube 4 specifically. I think there's like 9 of them now or something.
There's 9 and a couple other things too, yeah.
But I think it's only like this one and the latest that are actually of this like super vintage power level. So I would be very curious to see how some of the other ones play, if they're meant to be a little lower powered.
Yeah. I had been interested in playing it. Brandon did the, let's call it 50 hours of work or so to actually make it printable in paper, printed versions of each of the tokens. There's all kinds of crazy token things going on in the set. A lot of cards deal with conjuring and other magic mechanics. So Brandon went through the effort of like basically making cards that you get to pick up and put in your hand when you're supposed to conjure something into your hand. So all that effort really allowed these cards to function where even just printing out the, 360 or whatever would not have worked. So it was especially a treat to have Brandon put that much work into making it good.
Oh yeah, and I bet it was more than 50 hours. Having just printed out my whole cube. It's probably a underestimate.
Yep.
Props to him for sure.
I think that's kind of the beauty though, is like no matter what, he knew lock it in for sure. This thing was going to get played. Like it was not going to be a futile effort that went for naught. So after that, which was the most overwhelming draft anyone had ever done, we just did a retail booster Kaldheim draft.
Yeah, back on the complexity roller coaster.
Yeah, the all the way up to all the way down. I remember feeling like Kaldheim was like a high point around the sets around it, and drafting it this time, I had a much lower opinion of it.
Oh, I had known there's kind of like a meme, at least I've heard, that like Kaldheim was a notoriously bad draft set, but I was willing to give it a chance. But then I think it was proved a little bit as we got into it. It's definitely that kind of pre-fire Magic design, which isn't to say, it's a lot of like straight up kind of unplayable cards in the common and uncommon slots.
Yeah. It is like post-fire in terms of when it released, like it's a year or two after Eldraine, but I think it's maybe still as.
I guess it's no play boosters, right?
Yeah.
Is that the term I'm looking for?
Yeah, maybe that's what we're thinking here. Like still plenty of stinker commons, which is just not something that I'm used to drafting anymore. Like it's been 2 years since, or maybe more, since Murders at Karlov Manor put us in this like world of one less common per pack, but every one of these commons has at least one home.
Yep.
Then I think the other thing that was kind of a bummer is I think the flavor of Kaldheim people really loved, and they wanted to be able to have the giant deck or the elf deck or the human deck or the demon deck or the whatever deck, because that's sort of the vibe. There's 10 creature typey color pairs, but they aren't really a thing you get to do.
Yeah, I went into the draft first picking this Saga, the Battle of Frost and Fire, Just 5 mana and is it colors. Deals 4 damage to each non-giant creature. So right away, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I think this is a slow set. I'm going to draft giants. I'm going to wipe the board. I'm going to go crazy. And all the giants were just really bad. Every one of them I saw, I'm like, I'm not going to live long enough to play this card.
Yeah.
And then, so that just sat in my sideboard. And then I brought it in one game. We were just doing a second round as we had extra time. And, because my opponent had gone like super wide on me, and I'm like, oh man, maybe that Saga was actually like the answer. Like that's what I needed there. And then the next game, he just deploys 2 stupid giants on me, and I'm like, no, this card does nothing. And I think that was just kind of the interesting thing about Kaldheim, where it's like, there's these weird kind of creature type build arounds, sort of narrowly supported, not as much as you'd see in like a Bloomburrow or a Lauren Eclipse. They're kind of like hiding there in the background in a way that doesn't quite work. There's the whole snow theme, which it feels really weird, kind of like drafting snow basics highly, but the bigger issue is that you're not really paid off for it.
Or you're only really paid off for it if you play the slow Sultai deck, which absolutely can make use of snow, but it's like it's just the same as every other soupy slow deck in every other format. Like it's not that distinct in its vibe.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I love the flavor of Kaldheim. I hope we go back soon. I love foretelling. I think is super cool.
Yeah, foretell was still very fun. I didn't play Sultai. I played like Teamer good cards, which was all like foretell and card draw and like just the good cards in those 3 colors. And it was strong, but it was the same kind of deck I could have played in a lot of other formats, just with the foretell mechanic. And it was kind of interesting to actually do the work of finding out that's true. I would have thought, like, my memory, my vibe was that Kaldheim was like Bloomburrow, that had like a lot of typey cool decks to play, some of which are stronger than others, but they're all really clear and cool and different. It just didn't play out for me in Kaldheim.
Yeah, and hopefully they can nail that whenever we go back. And I will say, I got to do a little play with runes. And runes are one of those cards I have like a soft spot for. There's something in my kind of like Melvin mindset. I just love being able to like, I got an equipment and now I'm going to make that equipment even better. I'm like, I'm stacking value, but yeah, the payoffs for it just kind of aren't there to make it worth doing over just like your generic beater set.
Yeah. Our last draft of the weekend was Power Cube, which was mostly traditional, but don't expect something completely cut and dry. Christopher here had a new sort of tweak. He's been maintaining this cube for probably a decade or whatever. But he had a new tweak here where there were 2 of about 20 cards. So there were a number of cards where he felt like, I would like this to exist as a strategy. However, only one of it existing in all of Magic prevents it from being a strategy, or makes it so the strategy is not supported enough. Good.
Can I take a guess as to one of the cards?
Sure.
I had to leave before this draft. Was there an Arclight Phoenix? Buy one, get one free?
Oh.
Was that one of them?
I don't know. I didn't see that one. That is a good guess and a good example, because that's like spells mattery kind of, Yeah,
because I've seen that actually played out in some other cubes before. I've seen the same thing with like Ether Vial too. I think it's a cool concept. I do think, I'm really curious to hear your experiences on how it played out. Generally these, and Vengevine is another I've seen with the same kind of buy one, get a few more deal. And I think it's one of those ways where it's like, here's a card we're nostalgic about, that we want to still be good. And maybe if I give you extra copies of them, they'll be good enough. And typically I've found, unfortunately, like the extra copies aren't enough to save it, but please prove me wrong. I'm curious to see, hear how it goes.
We'll see how I do. To be clear, you don't get a second copy for drafting it. There are just 2 in the pool.
Interesting. Okay. So you have to work even harder for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe you just have like 2 chances of seeing it.
Okay.
I don't think there's 2 brain freezes, but that would be an example of like, my other draft was doomed because the one brain freeze was taken somewhere else, or maybe didn't even appear in a pack. Here's 2 shots of seeing that.
Okay, so we're not talking weak cards here. These are just more kind of the narrow build-arounds.
Yeah. let's cut 20 cards we don't like that much and put a second copy in of 20 cards that we would like to double dose. And some of those were like rituals, like the red ritual. There was 2 of, maybe to help Storm a little bit. I think Dream Hall shows up twice, which is a kind of meme. Rather than pay the mana cost for a spell, its controller may discard a card that shares a color with that spell. This affects everybody. You're hoping that it's going to be better for you. But like, you can cast a 10 mana spell by discarding a 10 mana green card by discarding a green card. That's a card that Christopher has wanted to work. If you put just 1 in a deck, the chance is like quite hard to make that work. It's a 5 mana enchantment, so you got to work pretty hard to put it on the battlefield in time to not die. And Christopher said, let's put 2 copies in. Now I can actually make my deck work. I can fully build around it. And that's the one that he built around and absolutely went nuts. Like whenever he played it, basically you're chaining like multiple draw spells, you're chaining like ultimatums, you're chaining like really big things so that you can like get through your deck and kill your opponent after probably casting 15 cards.
I guess you really hope to win after you cast it before your opponent can get any of the benefit.
Yeah, he was confident that he would win, but it was definitely like back in the Magic Online days, it was F6, skip everything. I pass priority infinitely. Feel free to kill me however you feel fit. I think it was successful there, or at least, he had this plan that he wanted. Some of the other ones were kind of funny, and just to sort of joke around with Christopher, I jumped on one of them, which I would not have ever thought of as a Vintage Cube level card, which is Steel Overseer. This is a 2 mana artifact creature that's a 1/1 that taps to put a +1/+1 counter on each artifact creature you control. On its own, it's going to grow from 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, 4/4. If you have a couple extra artifact creatures, you grow them a little faster. Maybe you got a little battlefield superiority. I was pretty skeptical this would be a good enough card. I got so cut on artifacts that I was half artifact creature the deck and half white weenie just to have enough playables. But Steel Overseer did do some work. I put 2 in my deck. Sometimes I would draw one of them most games, and I got to pump my artifact creatures over and over. So it kind of worked.
That card is a bomb. I love Steel Overseer.
Oh, you love Steel. Oh, you're a believer.
I run the Spider-Man version of it in my cube, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's just 1 mana more, but it gets vigilance. So you get to attack in with it and grow your whole board, which I do think is nice, because the thing with Steel Overseer is always there's this like, tension of like, when do I start attacking with it? How many turns am I just going to sit here growing my board? Yeah.
I had both Steel Overseers drafted, and I saw the Spider-Man one, and I'm like, clearly this is going to wheel. And somehow it didn't wheel. So I would have also played that if I could have.
I really like the idea of breaking Singleton, especially in that more powered kind of environment. Because, like you said, you do feel bad. I remember in my No Limit draft, too. Like, I took a Tinker and never found a target for it, but just like getting your Brain Freeze stolen, there's someone at the table who's probably like, I needed that card for my whole strategy to come together. And it's good to seed a little of those around when the build-arounds, are more narrow. It's like, it's hard to make another Tinker. There's a reason they haven't tried making another one since then. So it's cool to see he's doubling up on those.
I've really been thinking about the kind of naive drafting experience and like, how fun is this cube if you don't know the list ahead of time or it's not a fully standard cube? I think more cubes are more adventurous than they've ever been. So part of what I try to think about is like, what is it like to draft this if you don't have any advantage, right? You might know a lot of Magic cards. Maybe you played a lot of Magic. And I think that this kind of like including some 2-ofs is more ideal for that setup than it is for the more hardcore setup. Because I think if you were trying to like draft this on Arena or something, or you're trying to like win a box or whatever at an event, you'd kind of want to memorize all 20 cards that show up 2 times.
Yeah, I could see where there'd be a tendency to kind of spike it if you knew what's more supported.
I get this a lot with power cubes in general, where at the start there always seems to be this awkward thing of like, do you have Kiki Jiki combo in this cube? Do you have Chain of Smog, Witherbloom Apprentice? Like, and like the cube guy is trying to remember the combos that he's got in there off the top of his head kind of thing. There is kind of an awkwardness there when people are trying to be aware of that stuff. And I feel like this 2-of, this Singleton break, could lead to more of that feeling maybe.
Chris, though, in his power cube, it's a 540 cube, right?
Hmm.
Do you happen to know?
It's larger. It's not 360. I'm not quite
Okay,
sure the
yeah.
exact size. Yeah.
But I think that's where the doubling up probably makes even more sense again. As yeah, if
Yeah.
people are asking up front, hey, is there Kiki combo in
Mm.
here?
Mhm.
There's if you're a 360 cube, you can just say yeah, like it's in there.
Yeah.
But I do think there's always that bit of awkwardness with a larger cube.
Yeah.
Then if you are going to have combo cards like that.
Yeah. Entice people. Oh, Kiki's in here. Oh, but none of the other half showed up in these packs. Crap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you have at least two of them, then
Yeah.
the odds of at least seeing both of them are a lot higher. Or maybe you just get two Kikis and no twin.
Yeah.
I guess that could
Yeah.
happen too.
If you didn't know what the doubles were, would you still be hesitant to grab that Dream Halls? Would you, if you don't know what the doubles are, maybe you aren't actually that convinced to go try to draft it. I am curious about this sort of path of having doubles to reinforce archetypes, and I'm curious where it'll lead. I'm curious what the right kinds of cards to double up on are. Like, should it be doubled up on Bream Freeze, or should it be doubled up on rituals to give you mana? Like, is there a good answer, a good heuristic for what the better thing to double up is?
Yeah, and I'd be curious if he ever wants to try the kind of draft one, get one strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were talking about to begin with too. Is
Yeah.
that something I've seen in a number of other cubes?
Like a Squadron Hawk is the classic, where you draft one Squadron Hawk, you get
Exactly.
4, they tutor each other. Fun happens. Yeah.
Because then at least you don't have to rely on so much of, yeah, I'm seeing both halves of this. Just seeing one of them becomes enough to enable that build around. But you definitely have to do that to lower powered cards to begin with. So, maybe doing a mix of both can lead to some neat strategies.
And so that was the last draft. We ended up playing a little bit more Magic. Christopher had brought this gigantic box of kind of old precons that had like original Meriden, original Lorwyn, Time Spiral. And it was late at night. We didn't want to fire something up, but I said, let's play some more. Let's play that thing you brought. Christopher and I each picked out a Eventide precon. These products are kind of funny because they don't exist anymore, where they'd release a set and they'd release between 3 and 5 60 card standard playable precons, typically composed of only cards from that set. And there'd typically be like 2 rares and then like a variety of other stuff. And this was a fun thing to kind of reunite with. Like, isn't it weird that standard used to be the casual get into and play anything format, whereas now like standard events like are really about spiky stuff, and commanders maybe a little more on the casual side. But these were all casual standard decks composed of cards from single sets. And Eventide is a set that I have certainly looked at most of the cards for, but do not know these cards by heart. So it was very funny to kind of flip through these cards and see what they did to me, I guess. The deck that I picked was blue-green because I'm a big Simic guy. The cards that I played were insanely explosive. The games that we played were so powerful. It was crazy. One of the cards that I played was Shorecrasser Mimic. So this is 1 and a hybrid, so 2 mana for 2/1. When you play a spell that is both green and blue, it becomes a 5/3 trample until end of turn.
Whoa.
Guess what most of my cards were?
Green and blue, perhaps?
Yes. Almost all my cards were hybrid green-blue cards. So I just had like a 5/3. I can attack with a 5/3 every turn starting turn 3.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I miss the old dual decks. I think standard is maybe too expensive for that now, but I really love the idea of those decks you can just kind of pick up and play and take to your local game store and not get totally creamed.
Yeah, having the big box of them and picking 2 out of the same set was pretty fun. It definitely has a unique vibe to it. Like the cards that you get, you're probably not. These would be kind of weird to draft. Maybe you could do a Lorwyn block draft. I don't know, or double block draft. But it was so concentrated that it actually made the themes of Eventide work, of casting a spell that is both blue and green. This is the strongest Shorecrasser Mimic has ever been and will ever be in its life. And it's fun to see a card at its best. The other kind of retro thing that we did, kind of wrapping up, the next morning we're cleaning up the cabin. We want to play one more game. Let's have one more game before we all go home. And what we ended up settling on was another precon battle from Lorwyn. We had, I'm curious which deck you would have picked. We had Goblin versus Kithkin versus Elementals versus Merfolk. Who are you going with?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I'm a merfolk man myself.
Mm-hmm.
I like tapping things,
Yeah.
turning things sideways,
Yep.
kind of twiddling about there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We played this free for all, and playing free for all with low power standard decks, I feel like really reunited me with the spirit of Magic in some way, because we could comprehend every single card everyone else had on the board and know their ramifications collectively, which is not typically my experience with Commander. Like, typically you have to say, I know roughly what your most dangerous card is. All that other stuff you get to manage. Here, we knew exactly how much damage each other person could deal. We were wheeling, dealing. We were figuring out, trying to make our case for who should be attacked, which removal spells should be deployed. So it was some very pure free for all Magic. I got to play Merfolk as well, so I was having a good time. Merfolk has
Nice,
all
my
the
man.
smallest creatures. My biggest creature that I played was a 1/3.
But did they buff each other? Did he get bigger than a 1/3?
Also, no.
No.
Or I could tap Merfolk to mill someone. And so my overall plan was target one person with mill and then hope that I can convince the table to kill the other two people. And that worked. I won. So
So it just took a little politicking.
yeah.
Goblins could never.
Yeah, the goblins were the ones taking the game actions, I would say. All the goblins either could sacrifice other things to kill things, or themselves when they died would kill things. So they were the ones killing every creature that was remotely good.
That makes sense.
Unfortunately, all my creatures were bad, or I had one or two good creatures, but they got killed.
Yeah. So you're not a target.
Yeah, I'm not a target. Laid low. When you're playing those 20 life games, early in the game, say, hey, gates are open. I'm not blocking. Get down to 13. You want to sink your threat level as low as you can, as early as you can. Because no one's going to want to alpha strike the weak player, right? Because then they're going to get piled on by the other two. So you got to get a little bit weak early. That was my strat. That was how I navigated that game.
Smart.
It was fun. Playing weird formats. What are we here to do? We're here to do cubes. We're here to draft. That's the highest level of sort of creative expression, is curating a cube for someone in Magic or a set. But maybe also getting in some more classic Magic to reconnect you with the old ways is also a good thing to do. Yeah, maybe filling in time between cubes. I should have hit those precons more aggressively. And next time we do Magic Camp, if he brings those again, that's what I'm doing. So overall, what's one of your top? I mean, obviously you got your own cube, but outside of that, what is one of your top 2 picks? What are some of your favorite moments? What would you recommend to people?
I honestly enjoyed the Kamigawa cube a
Mm.
lot more than I thought I would.
Mm.
I do just love that kind of small board, kind of big impact gameplay, where, your cards aren't anything special on their own, but they kind of come together in this way to where, just each individual decision ends up mattering a lot more than you think it would, because the games are kind of longer and grindier, and sometimes it's just some stupid Zubera, some spirit that can end up being the star of the show, and I think it's cool seeing that, once in a while in the world of all the kind of power cubes and things.
If you get 2 into powered cube, now that's the normal stuff, and now I need something.
Exactly.
Whereas that's freaky to average players. That's usual to you, and you need more normal Magic in order to feel exotic.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you're a cube monogamist. You've got your one true cube. Is there anything that you're tempted or inspired to build for yourself?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said some of the Hell's Cube cards didn't tempt me a little bit either. They might be a little too far out there, but I think some of them are more reasonable, at least. There's some truly inspired designs buried in there, is what I'll say.
Once you get past the kind of edgelord energy of it, just the raw quantity of innovation and novelty and humor is just unbeatable. It's so crazy how it's like playing an unset draft with only the rares, only the ones that make you throw a card from 6 feet away, or only the ones that cause you to form a line of cards and keep that line stacked up. It's all that kind of crazy stuff. Alrighty. Well, that was a great recap. I really enjoyed Magic Camp once again. I feel like this was maybe the craziest one in terms of stuff I've never seen before or hadn't experienced in a long time. Before we get out of here, I want to remind everyone of our design challenge for August. That is going to be Augerload. Design a card with Overload or a similar text or target altering mechanic. So Overload, just to kind of recap, these were a bunch of cards that say like, deal 4 damage to target creature you don't control. Or Overload, deal 4 damage to each creature you don't control. Turn something from target to each. We would love a bunch of Overload cards, but I know everyone is also kind of wanting to explore other kinds of text changing effects, so we want to see those as well.
Like Cleave?
Cleave, yeah, all that great example. Yeah, Cleave, removing text from cards. Yeah, absolutely. What would you go for? What would your starting point be with Overload? Are you doing Overload? Are you doing Cleave? Are you going somewhere brand new?
Yeah, I got a pitch for you right off the dome, if I can make it live on the air here.
Yeah.
It's an Overload. Let's say 1 black. This is my swamp now. Gain control of target swamp. Overload for 6.
So you're going Hell's Cube mode.
Yeah, I think Hell's Cube has done lasting damage to my brain.
Love it. That's great.
Though I think crazily enough, just to give people an idea of the Hell's Cube power level, if that card were to be printed into Hell's Cube, I think it would then, you'd gain control of their swamp, and you would also create a 4/4 ogre named Shrek with Swamp Walk and Death Touch.
Swamp Walk after you've taken all their swamps, yeah.
Yeah, because why not?
Yeah, that's the exact humor they're going for. That would have devastated me. I was mono black in Hell's Cube, so...
Exactly, just take all your lands.
Game over, yeah.
They're mine.
We also throw in a couple bonus points, which you can also shoot for Target Player. The card features the text Target Player. And then Ogreload, Ogre or Troll theme. Maybe we got the Ogre Demon theme. Maybe we can bring back some of that Kamigawa flavor.
There you go. I love it.
Due August 29th, so get that card in. We would love to see everybody's cards. We'd love to talk about them. This is not so much about like designing the absolute best prize-winning card. This is about like coming up with a cool idea, giving us something to talk about. We're going to talk about each card. We're going to be, we're going to be gentle with you. So if you're listening, you haven't submitted a card before, this is a great way to get your card on the pod and us to, engage with something that you've made. But yeah, that's about it for the podcast for the week. Hop on the Discord to submit cards, talk about stuff, maybe do a draft or two with some of these custom sets. But I also want to thank you, Keith, for making some time to jump on the episode today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for giving me so much time just to talk as well. And I had another shout out to make here.
Oh, okay.
If that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention perhaps a plug for a future episode.
Sure.
We had a lot of talk about proxies today, a lot of cubes fully proxied. Yeah. And I don't know if you're aware, we're kind of entering, I'd say, the golden age of proxy making right now. So it used to be, a lot of work trying to, print cards at the right thickness and laminate them and doing all these different things to get them just right. And we have some technological advancements on the horizons that are going to make that a lot easier. Maybe I'll just leave it at that, nice and vague. And then if you ever want to have me back on to talk about it some more, I think that's something especially custom Magic designers might be interested in learning some more about.
All right. Along with this episode, I'm putting up the poll. Do you want the proxy episode? And we'll see if the people demand it. So check in the Discord. Support Keith here in his quest for a proxy app. Yeah, I heard you and Brandon talk about like specific paper cutters that both of you had, so I knew some high-level technology was being exchanged.
Yeah, different cutters and machines, all kinds of different ways to do it. But after printing and cutting some thousands of cards, I can speak with some authority on it now.
I love it. I'm going to need this technology for some of my projects, so I have a lot to learn as well. But if you want to talk to either of us, hop on the Discord, hop on the Beacon Discord. We're right there. We'd love to answer questions and talk about stuff. I just had someone join the Discord to ask me about a thing that I had made years ago, and I was happy to answer that question. And most of all, in addition to all that, thank you everyone for listening.